Hello and welcome. I'm Kaveh Taghwaye, and this is Press TV's Economic Divide. It's all about Egypt this time, and we have some surprises in store for you. It was an event fit for kings, but it was for Sisi, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the once general, now president of Egypt.
سيد الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية.
The most difficult thing about government,
I know we can swim together.
And political and economic well-being of the Egyptian people.
Investment promises in the billions of dollars, but will poor Egyptians get their share? That is, if the generals open their grip. A 30-year dictatorship that was followed by revolution in 2011, to be followed by a coup in 2013, with mass protests, deaths, insecurity, and economic instability plaguing the 80 million plus residents. Egypt has been in a turmoil since the year 2011. Yet even before that, during the Mubarak era, its population was poor, with over 40% to live on less than $1 per day. Our starting point is a look at Egypt's past and its current economic indicators. Egypt, located in the northeast corner of Africa, the most populated Muslim country in North Africa and the Arab world, and the 15th most populated in the world. At its peak, Egypt grew at a pace of 8% yearly between the years 2004 and 2008, thanks to fiscal, monetary policies, taxation, and privatization. Here are some quick facts. The population is 84.2 million strong, with over 35% between the ages of 18 and 35, with GDP at $536.6 billion. Average media growth at a little over 2.1%, with the per capita income standing at over $6,500. But what's alarming is the poverty rate. According to UNICEF, 9.2 million children live in poverty, with an additional 7.5 million children to be vulnerable to extreme poverty. Looking at the overall poverty rate, child poverty stood at 28.8 and 52.2% for the lower and upper poverty line, and for the overall population, it stood at 26.3 and 49.9%. All of the figures were compounded due to the 2011 revolution, which a couple of years later became exponentially worse after the army coup, which overthrew then-President Mohamed Morsi. At the height of it, former finance minister and economist said that Egypt was in such a dire predicament due to foreign investment and tourism collapse that it was suffering the worst economic crisis since the 1930s. Because of political instability and security, Egypt experienced a drastic fall in both foreign investment and tourism revenues, followed by a 60% drop in foreign exchange reserves, a 3% drop in growth, and a rapid devaluation of the Egyptian pound. All this has led to mushrooming food prices, ballooning unemployment, and a shortage of fuel and cooking gas, causing Egypt's worst crisis. With its foreign reserves quickly dwindling from $30 billion, Egypt needed a lifeline quick. That came from its friends in the Persian Gulf, namely Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Kuwait, who pledged a combined $12 billion, not in the form of a loan, but direct money. Then President Morsi was not aware that it came with a political price that cost him his presidency in the form of a Saudi and army-backed coup, which put General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in power. The $12 billion lifeline thrown by Egypt's Persian Gulf friends would not be enough to help Egyptians. One reason, the democratically elected president, Mohamed Morsi, was overthrown through an army-backed coup. Now that led to mass protests even to this day, leading to political instability and almost daily bouts of violence. So, could Egypt and its general president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, well, what can he do now? The answer? The Egyptian Economic Development Conference.
I expect from the event great improvement in the economic situation of Egypt.
I'm very optimistic about this event.
كلمة فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية.
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا جزيلا.
It was a grand event, the who's who in the business world, and some notable names in the political arena.
Egypt has laid down a sustainable development plan that is long-term until 2030.
I am really pleased to announce that the investment authorities in my country, Kuwait, will direct $4 billion.
Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will submit a bundle of assistance in the form of $4 billion.
I would like to announce additional support by United Arab Emirates to
the Egyptian Economic Development Conference, attracting more than 1,700 investors, government officials, and consultancy experts, plus Tony Blair.
The most difficult thing about government is taking the great idea and turning it into reality.
Lagarde was also present.
I saw the sun rise over Egypt, and I was probably one of the first ones to swim in the pristine water of the Red Sea. I know we can swim together.
I think we have an incredible past, but I'm sure we have an incredible future.
Along with the U.S. Secretary of State, John Kerry.
The American people are committed to the security and political and economic well-being of the Egyptian people, and we will work with you.
The Guardian may have hit the nail on the head. There's nothing remotely representative about a palatial conference held entirely inside a bubble, beyond which an armed insurgency is raging in northern Sinai, an average of 4 bombs a week exploding in Cairo, and a third of young children nationally to be afflicted by malnutrition. Let's not forget mass arrests, death sentences for Muslim Brotherhood members, and in some cases, their supporters. Journalists put on trial, not quite a setting which spells Egypt is open for business. So why did the conference happen at this time?
That's for Egypt to continue to develop its economy. And particularly if we're looking at Cairo and the problems and the troubles that Cairo have had in the past in terms of congestion and pollution, developing a new Cairo to the east is clearly going to help the economy and help build Egypt as a whole. So on the face of it, it sounds like a great deal.
This conference is happening now because actually it's vital that Egypt manages to start attracting more inward investment. So what it's trying to do is make sure it attracts notice in terms of political stability, inward investment and political response, especially from the West, obviously, which is why it's got so many guests coming in from that area.
Well, I cannot tell you that these new investment and job creation is not going to benefit the rich. They will benefit the rich.
A conference fit for kings, practically, well, for President Sisi. I correct myself, actually, the once General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who took orders from SCAF. That stands for the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, who took the power to govern Egypt from 2 presidents. Yet what everyone at the conference seems to either dismiss or discount as not being that important is, it is the military who controls the economy, up to 40% of it. So why would the army allow competition and share the wealth with outsiders? After all, weren't they the ones who failed to equitably share the wealth and the benefits with the broader population? Will the army change this time around?
I don't think that's going to change on any level at all, and in fact it could probably get worse.
Time has changed. The military knows, they have experienced two revolutions, counter-revolutions, and they also understand that if the economy does not improve, they will experience counter-revolutionary movement.
This is going to be fascinating this time to see if it's going to be different this time. Traditionally, of course, the entire economy has virtually been run by the military, traditionally, and so with the change of government and the change again, the question is it going to be different this time?
These are the faces that comprise what's known as SCAF. The Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. Egypt's military. It's more than a military, it's also a diverse economic empire, one of the largest in the world, a force of about 450,000. And in terms of its economic grip, an extraordinary number. They control between 15% on the low side and up to 40% of Egypt's economy. From manufacturing to real estate to gas cylinders, even fertilizers and construction, all in the hands of the military.
They produce almost everything you could ever imagine, starting from pasta to olive oil to water, mineral water, to pots and pans, to kitchen stoves, to ovens, to cement, to steel and iron, to chemicals, to pyrosol, pesticides, to everything.
The army also owns numerous farms and parcels of land across the country. The generals say their budget is a national security issue. That's why they won't allow any parliamentary oversight.
Well, here is the opportunity for the military to prove that actually any other investment coming in is not just going to be kept in the hands of the few, not just going to be restricted to the military authorities, but is going to allow the economy to broaden out. And this is going to be a crucial issue.
The economy to broaden out and not be kept in the hands of a few? Well, it will be kept in the hands of the few. Based on the looks of the investment conference, companies will take advantage of Egypt's wealth for their profit while employing poor Egyptians at non-competitive wages, like they have done in other parts of the world.
I know how important it is to the Egyptian people, and we're not going to let you down. We need to execute on this project. So.
Egypt is going, when it comes to size of economy, population base, I guess, it is on its way to be the most important 20 economy in the world.
One is institutionalizing implementation, making it the DNA of the institutions that don't just serve a privileged few, but serve the population as a whole.
We need to build a new system. We have to get rid of the existing bureaucratic system.
The economy has to start moving, and it has to move on a broader basis. If it doesn't, the problems for Egypt are only going to get worse at the moment. It's losing a great deal of money through the lack of tourism, and it's losing a lot of money through the lack of investment. It needs to be seen to be strong and stable and safe.
Strong and stable and safe. The three S's that don't apply to present-day Egypt. The proof in these headlines.
Police trying to stop them with barricades. When that doesn't work, they fire tear gas.
An Egyptian court sentenced Mohammed Badi, the leader of the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood, and 13 other senior members of the group, sentenced them to death for inciting chaos and violence.
A night of grief for Egyptians. The news of the bombings in Al Arish that claimed the lives of over 27 soldiers and civilians has shocked the country.
مفيش كلب ينزل الشارع يتكلم إلا اللي عايز ينزل يشتغل. عايز ألاقي بكرة في دم، دلوقتي في دم، دم اللي هو القصاص، دم بالعشرات، دم بالمئات. أنا بتكلم بجد. أيوة، كل من قتل يقتل. مش عايز حد يقبض على حد. بطلوا حكاية القبض دي. مش عايزها، مش عايز أشوفها، مش عايز أسمع عنها. أنا عايز جثث. جثث للإرهابيين القتلة.
That was one of Egypt's state TV news anchors promoting death, the death sentence for anyone opposing the government, and while eliminating freedom of expression. I wonder if the investors from the conference are aware of this, let alone the tourists who visit Egypt. Putting the lack of stability to the side, what about the generals? Will they be reliable partners?
Overseas investors need to make sure that they're dealing with a reliable partner and not one which money is just being siphoned off into corrupt authorities. So it's for the authorities to prove this time that this time it's going to be different. The question is, will it be?
If Egypt does well, the Arab world will be more stabilized. If Egypt continues to be in turmoil, then this is going to impact on other Arabs and throughout the region.
If we look at Christine Lagarde, who's the MD, the CEO of the IMF, she was there and she was very positive about what's happening in Egypt at the moment, and Egypt are going to open its previously closed markets, particularly in energy and other infrastructure. And by opening up those markets to the free capital of the world, that will only do one thing for your general Egyptian, and that will mean it will push prices up. So it will be great for the global elite in terms of they'll have somewhere to spend their money and invest their money, but in terms of what will happen for a general Egyptian and an ordinary citizen like you or me, then prices clearly will go up, and that's been demonstrated all around the world if you look at infrastructure projects that have happened in other countries where they've gone from being state-owned and managed to being privately owned and managed.
So it's interesting when you look at the amount of support and effort that's gone into this conference. You can see how well organized it's been.
That's the big question here. A conference of this size does take a lot of planning, something the Egyptian government, a young one at that, is not really capable of doing.
If you had the ability to actually create a Middle Eastern-style Davos conference on a regular basis, that would be certainly quite a key issue to have achieved.
But that did happen. May 18, 2008, when Hosni Mubarak was in power. But here's where things get interesting.
I mean, after all, if you're going to get the organization that helps set up the Davos major conference, which gets huge coverage all over the place, and then with high-profile guests like Madame Lagarde and Mr. Kerry as well, that just shows the level of importance they've got. They've been able to attract these names in.
And who's got the power to attract these names? In an unstable country at that, to have gone through a revolution and a coup, all in a matter of 4 years? Their name, Richard Atias and Associates, a strategic consulting firm run by the man who founded the annual World Economic Forum in Davos. As you're about to find out, it is part of a larger group, WPP plc, which is where things get interesting. This conference was planned a long time ago, maybe 1 year, maybe even longer. It could have actually coincided when Egypt's coup took place. After all, Egypt needed a leader not for Egyptians, but one that would listen to Western countries, like the US, and even, maybe more important, a leader that would reassure Israel's security by keeping intact the Camp David Treaty while ensuring gas supplies. Even some of the moderators for the conference were well-known news anchors and presenters for that added conviction, like from the BBC.
Mr. Blair, nice to see you here rather than London.
Thanks, Nick.
I'd like to ask you about the kind of message you leave when you come here in your informal meeting.
To CNN.
Let's welcome to the stage somebody, and we talked about the credentials of General Electric and its investment track record in the country. Our next guest is the Chairman Chief Executive Officer of Siemens, a company with better than 340,000 employees, with a market cap of $114 billion, and just announced a major investment into Egypt today.
Here's the company name, Richard Atias and Associates. There you see it at the bottom of the video. The monumental task of attracting these investors in the first place was to inject trust way before the date of the conference, a vast PR work which could only be done through the media.
We begin this half hour with travel, new horizons to explore in the new year.
CBS News travel editor Peter Greenberg is here with his picks for the most fascinating destinations of 2015. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning.
All right, now we want to go from Europe to North Africa and Egypt, actually. I mean, there's a lot been happening in Egypt. Is it safe to travel there?
I think it is, and in fact, I'm going to be there in about a week. I mean, Egypt is, you know, if you look at the numbers, in 2010, you had over 14 million tourists in Egypt. Last year, 9 million, a significant drop. And now it's starting to come back, because when you look at the history and the economics of Egypt, the only thing they produce that the world consumes in volume is travel and tourism. Mm-hmm. Their GDP literally puts food on the table. It feeds their people. It creates jobs. And it's in their best interest to be open and safe, and they are.
We were kind of the best of the worst for the last 4 years. We were the most fortunate in really unfortunate circumstances. In the last 3 or 4 months, business has really improved. You can absolutely put together a luxury experience.
Time to find out who Richard Atias is. This is his website. Here it mentions how he has built an unrivaled reputation for advising global leaders, corporations, and nations on how to build their global influence. Some of his clients, amongst many, the Persian Gulf island of Bahrain, China, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and yes, even the United States and the UK, not to mention the United Nations. How does a company attract the most powerful countries as clients? The answer lies in 3 letters: WPP plc. A British multinational advertising and public relations company with its main management office in London, England, and its executive office in Dublin, Ireland. Doesn't sound that big, does it? And then, of course, what's the connection to Egypt? Well, here's a visit to Wikipedia. And here's where the scope and size of this advertising group becomes evident. An empire of companies under the control, command, and ownership of WPP. 162,000 employees with 3,000 offices in 110 countries. So who's behind this conglomerate? Who are the CEOs? Here they are. Martin Sorrell, born in London to a Jewish family, whose ancestors came from Russia, Poland, and Romania.
2015 will be very similar to what it was in 2014. It'll be another G2 year. If you look at the deltas, the increases in revenues in the industry.
And Philip Lader, an Ashkenazi Jew, which Wikipedia editors conveniently did not mention in his background. He was the U.S. ambassador to the UK from 1997 to 2001, and since 2001, has been chairman of the WPP Group. Wow, what a big company WPP plc is. Now, what's more interesting is the influence that they wield over countries and politicians, as you saw in the investment conference, which may explain the cozy relationship between Egypt and Israel. Fact: Sir Martin Sorrell is Jewish and openly sympathetic to Israel's position and security in the Middle East. And maybe that is where Egypt comes in. During the first Europe-Iran forum in London last year, Sir Martin Sorrell, in looking to invest in Iran, had one prerequisite or condition. He made it clear to the largely Iranian expat audience that Iran has to formally recognize the state of Israel. That does it for this edition of Economic Divide. Your thoughts, comments, and criticism matters to us. Do send them. The links and addresses are at the bottom of the screen. Looking forward to seeing you next week.